Scarcity mentality is not just about money. It's also about things like compliments, also about things like opportunities, also about things like a favor. You don't want people to favor you because you're like, if you favor me, then I have to owe you. So scarcity mentality is not just about money. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I believe in what you do, what you represent. I believe so much in the power of growing people, impacting lives positively, adding value, enriching people, and just the whole journey. I'm a big believer in transformation. I believe that at the end of the day, what really matters is not so much about your accomplishments in terms of metrics, but the things that you cannot truly measure with material substance. I'm talking about things like how much joy have you brought into the world? How much hope have you offered somebody? How much strength has somebody gained because you existed? Who's grateful for your existence? Who's excited that your paths crossed, And I want to celebrate Coach A, Coach A.T.A. and his amazing team, Bola with the correspondence, backstage, and all the other people doing some good work on the team. I celebrate and salute you massively. All right, I'm going to try to do this in 35 minutes, and then we're going to have discussions or Q&A. So I'm speaking today along the lines of the shift, from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And that's something that all of us need to have from time to time, because what I realized about the journey of personal transformation and personal growth is that you never arrive. You never get to a point where you're like, I've got to lock down, this is everything I need, and I haven't. No, because what happens is what you consider your vision today is going to become manifest reality tomorrow. And when you get to that point of manifest reality, because you are a dreamer, because you're visionary, because you're driven, you're going to see something else. Then you're going to see something else. I remember a time in my life where my major financial goal was, how do I get $100 for speaking for an hour? And it may look ridiculous right now, but I remember back in the days where I was partnered with a friend. We had this web business. I might speak about it a little bit more. We had this web-based business. It was a web hosting business. I was more into the marketing side of things. He was more into the programming side of things. So we had a partnership. It's about 2008 thereabout, and then we started a web support service-based business. And I remember back then when we wanted to pay for things online, we'd have to go to the bank and then gather the money we had. I think it was $1 to 140 naira at the time. So you take about 14,000 naira, like a whole lot of money, $100, because you wanted to be able to pay for your server, some kind of web package and all of that. So there was a time in my life where that was my goal, $100. Then after a while, $500. And after a while, $1,000, then $10,000. The point I'm trying to make is money in and of itself is not the greatest reflection of achievement. However, it's a container, right? And so when you look at things surrounding money, don't think about it just based on paper or coins and all of that. Think about it in terms of I'm being stretched. And whatever it is I consider my vision right now is only going to be a stepping stone when I achieve it. So we'll never quite get there. Tony Robbins calls it the principle, the CANI principle, the CANI principle. And what it means by the CANI principle is that it's the constant and never-ending improvement principle. We have to be obsessed with our reality. So I'm going to share a couple of things with us today, and I know that somebody's going to get something. I'm so super excited that so many brilliant people have already spoken. All right. Now, so a bit of my journey, talking about scarcity. Now, like I mentioned, I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't arrived, but I've gone way ahead of where I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I became a lot more conscious about the process of personal transformation. So I grew up in what people might call middle-class Nigerian family, right? I grew up in that kind of setting, that kind of environment where there was some sort of job security at the time. Like my parents were civil servants. And if you know anything about civil servants in Nigeria, that was not the greatest way to become rich. As a matter of fact, in their own generation of civil service, people didn't go into power, into government, or work with the government for the purpose of getting money. That was not why they went there. They believed that they had some value. They believed that they had some contribution to make, and they were very happy doing that. And there was some kind of stability, some kind of predictability. So I grew up in what you might call a stable economic environment, at least for the earlier part of my life. Now, based on certain dramatic twists and turns in the Nigerian economy, political upheavals, a shake-up here, fiscal policy change over there, things became pretty tough at some point. And I remember seeing that from having 3 or 4 cars in my house, my parents end up with 2 cars, and at a time end up with 1 car. And at a time, that car was like a scar. What do I mean by that? We had to find ourselves in a case where sometimes for the car to actually start, we had to jumpstart the car. We had to push the car. Like it was maybe sometimes like twice a week before you actually get the car working. So by the time I was about 9, 10, going on 10, things were already beginning to get very tight. By 11, 12, secondary school was in boarding house. I knew that things were very, very tough, really, really tough. And I knew that because whenever it was time to go back to school, I would make a list of things I wanted, right? A list of things I wanted. And and what would happen is that whenever I presented that list, my dad especially, initially, my dad would go, oh, the things are so expensive. We can't afford that now. And I mean, my parents are fantastic people. So I don't say this out of any kind of disrespect or disdain or dishonor, right? It's just a story of my life. So I knew that they were very rich in love, rich in good works, rich in affection, rich in prayer. But because of the changes that happened, that they were not necessarily prepared for. In fact, most people in Nigeria were not prepared for that shift. If you know anything about what happened in Nigeria in the 90s and how there was such a huge switch. Schools were shutting down, job losses were on the rise, people were, fleeing the country like it's happening again now. Things were really, 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 really tough. And so in the middle of all of that, my father would usually cut down the list. So whatever it was I wanted, no matter what it was I wanted, my dad would cut down the list. Okay. And what I didn't realize was that was beginning to condition me for less than. Because somewhere in my subconscious, I began to get used to settling for less than. And, some of those things are so important because they happen at a subliminal level. You don't even get to it. You don't even understand what's going on. You're not even sure where this kind of ideology is coming from. So for some people, it might be in the case of you resisting compliments. You don't like to be complimented. You're like, when people say, oh, nice hair, you're like, I'm not quite sure. When people say, oh, you're really great at this, and you don't know that that's actually scarcity mentality. So you see now, scarcity mentality is not just about money. It's also about things like compliments, also about things like opportunities, also about things like a favor. You don't want people to favor you because you're like, if you favor me, then I have to owe you. So scarcity mentality is not just about money. For me, it started more from a monetary perspective, a fiscal dimension, FISCAL, but it didn't quite stop there. And so what happened, somebody's laughing because I said the car became a scar. Right. So what happened was I began to have this adjustment in my mind. Why? Because when my mom would look at it, it would be like, your father is always going to say, we don't have that now, so reduce that. So I became used to reducing my expectations. I became used, watch this, to managing instead of multiplying. And one of the signs, one of the symptoms of scarcity, of the scarcity mentality, is that you manage more than you multiply. You are more comfortable, right, with cutting down than with creating. And that was on for a long time, and I didn't know how bad it was. But I began to discover that there were certain things that I couldn't go for, couldn't appreciate, couldn't reach out for because of this mindset. But then I began to have certain changes. When I turned 17, I stumbled on a book called Unleash the Giant Within You, written by Tony Robbins, and I began to talk about beliefs and values and how our lives are shaped by our beliefs. And I'm almost sure that almost every speaker so far on the summit has spoken about beliefs or values at some point or the other. Anyhow, stumbled on this book and I began to see, wow, that our lives are literally reflections of our beliefs, the things that we're holding on to, the stories that we believe about ourselves, the stories that we believe about the world, the stories that we believe about money, the stories we believe about material things, the stories we believe about what's possible. So here's what I wanted to realize today, that possibilities are personal. And if somebody can just type that in the chat box right now, let me know we're still together. Let me know you're getting something. Just type it, possibilities are personal. What does that mean? That means that somebody will look at something and say, that can never happen. Somebody looks at the same thing and says, this can happen for me. I can get a breakthrough here. I can make a switch here. Something can shift for my good. So I stumbled on that book, and that was the very first theme that began to rock my world. I mean, Terrence at the time was about 24 years and was sharing certain stories about how he had grown from being hungry and being a place where he didn't have food to now where he was able to serve thousands of meals every year. At the time, I believe he serves millions of meals every year now. So that challenged me. But then I still needed certain references in my environment. So fast forward to when I was about, I believe I was about 20, 21 now. I went for a certain event. And in that event, this man began to tell a story. Now, one of the major things I realized about him was that he was as spiritual as my parents. But he seemed to be, well, at least I thought it was as spiritual as my parents, but he seemed to be more adept when it came to finances. He seemed to have both what I would call riches and righteousness. And that's one of the major things that I've seen, especially for those of us who grew up in religious environments or from highly spiritual environments, right? Where we have this idea that we have to either hold on to righteousness or riches, that you cannot have both at the same time. But the truth is you can have a blend of riches and righteousness at the same time. How do I know? There is nobody who's more righteous than God. There is nobody who's holier than God. Yes, God says that the cattle and the 1,000 hills, they belong to me. The silver and the gold, they are mine. Everything that has ever been created belongs to me. So if God is righteous and God is rich, that means it's possible to be both righteous and rich. Is somebody still falling on this right now? So I went for this event, and this man began to speak about different things, about how his life had changed, how he started a newspaper. I was making millions at the time. I believe they were making millions of naira every week, and that literally just rocked my world. It literally just rocked my world, and that put me on the path, on the journey for transformation. From that event, the things I learned in that event, the opportunities that were presented in that event, within about 6 weeks, my income grew by about 600%. About 600%. And that's why I don't take learning and development for granted. I don't know who it is right now, but think about it right now. How would you feel? Let me ask you, how would you feel if your income could grow by 600% in the next 6 weeks? How would you feel? Come on, tell me in the chat box. Tell me in the chat box. How would you feel if your income could grow by 600%? Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing those comments by Bridget. I'm seeing those comments. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. How would you feel? I mean, that's a possibility. Don't forget what I said. Possibilities are personal. What is possible for one person may not be possible for the other person. Why? Because possibilities work with our beliefs. Possibilities work with our mind. Possibilities work with the inner story, not the external circumstances, but the inner story. So anyway, I began leverage technology, multiplied my income by 600% within that span of time, and then began to grow. And so before I graduated from the university, I started earning what people will call decent money, amounts of money. And then, I mean, it's relative again. Some people it's small money, but others quite a sum of money. And by the time I was done with school, I was able to begin to take care of myself. It was not the easiest thing, but I just said to myself, I'm not going back to my parents' house. I want to build a life. And it took quite a number of years. So a couple of things that have helped me, which I believe will also, you will find very valuable. Now, whenever people think about money, whenever people think about abundance, here is the first major error a lot of people make. So when you think about abundance, don't just think about what is available in the material realm. So when I talk about assets, the thing says, well, all I can see here is mud. And then the person builds a mud hut. But somebody else looks at the earth and says, well, what is beneath the mud? What is beneath the loamy soil? What is beneath this thing, precious stone? And he digs deep enough and he believes that people never knew existed. Somebody looks at that same thing and says, if I dig deep enough, I might strike oil and slurry oozing forth. Somebody else looks and says, this is dark, this is grime, this is grease, and walks away from it. Somebody else says, if I analyze this, process this, if I think about this, maybe it will turn into something else. So don't think just about what is available. I need to make that very clear. Think about what is possible based on the asset you already have. So somebody has a speaking gift. He says, well, I just play around with it. I just entertain friends with it. Somebody else has a speaking gift and it becomes Trevor Noah, right? And is earning millions and millions and millions of dollars every year on the Daily Show. Somebody looks at himself and says, oh dear, I'm so unfortunate. I was born tonight. There's so much racism in the world. It's unfair. And he goes, I will never amount to anything. Somebody else looks at that story and says, my father, my mother, white, I grew up in a caste system, but that is part of my story. And he writes a book. I'm talking about Trevor Noah as well. He writes a book and it becomes a best-selling author, opens doors for him, and is on the world stage. So don't just think about what's available. Think about what is possible. What is possible? So let me give you an example. That story I told you about the seminar I went for, and my mind began to open new dimensions. I was about 20 or 21 at the time. My mind began to open up to new dimensions, okay? In that same event, I overheard certain people from behind me saying this. They're like, they spoke in vernacular. So let me interpret it. Let me speak in English, right? The person said, these people, they are not telling us the truth. They are just, they're just playing around. They're just giving us stories. This is not really the truth. Now, whilst the person was saying that, even though I was not yet manifesting the things I was learning, the insights I was gleaning, the possibilities I was incubating, I was not yet manifesting that. But something in my mind knew that this guy behind me was wrong. I was like, wow, my mind was blown. I was thinking possibilities. This other man was quite an older, much older person, must have been in his 40s at the time. And he was doubting. Why? Because he could not see the possibilities. Watch this, please. You are not poor if you are rich in possibilities. You are not poor if you are rich in possibilities. Which means that if you have possibility thinking, which means that you have the mind of an explorer, you have the mind of adventure, you're inquisitive, you're thinking, you're probing, you're on this call right now, you're subscribed to the payment plans to access all the different streams, right? You are not poor. So what is possible based on the assets? That's number one switch that you must make. Whenever you look at an opportunity, don't just think about that opportunity. Think what is possible. Whenever you think about a relationship, don't just think about the relationship. Think what is possible. Whenever you think about it, just think what is possible. What else is possible? Let me give you an example. I remember when I started hosting my seminars in 2008, 2009, more actively in 2009, and I would run all the seminars, and many of them were literally small seminars and all. But guess what? People were coming and paying like 7,500 naira. And at the time, maybe you have about 10 people, you have maybe about 12 people sometimes. In my mind, I started thinking, these are indicators of possibilities. These are indicators. So back then, people will pay me that amount of money in naira. Now, these days, people will pay me that amount of money in dollars. I'm doing virtually the same thing, but on a deeper scale, on a higher scale, on a broader scale, on a more intense scale, on a more deliberate scale. These are possibilities. Possible. So number two is this. Whenever you think abundance, don't just think about what is available. Don't just think about what is possible. Also think about what is accessible. Think about what is accessible. Now, what do I mean by that? The fact that I don't have it with me right now does not mean I will never have it. The fact that it's not within the ambit of my personal control right now does not mean I will never have it. The fact that I don't have the qualification for it right now does not mean I'll never have it. Now, let me tell you something that I discovered. In the African mindset, most people attribute academic achievement with possibility. So they go like, if you have your BSc, your bachelor's degree, oh, you stand a chance. If you have a master's degree, then you stand a chance. If you have a PhD, see, I'm not saying don't get your PhD. I'm not saying don't get your MSc, but I'm saying as you get your MBA, right? Your master's in business administration, also get your MBA, your mega bank account, right? Why? Because that thinking is the product of a certain cluster of people, is the product of a certain timeline in the progression of humanity. What do I mean by that? The Industrial Revolution, there's a certain kind of professions, certain kind of skills. So accounting, engineering, doctor, all of that. And the ideology is that for you to have that, you have to be factory fitted, you have to be cookie cut, you have to fit into a template, because everything in that dispensation was about calculations, computations, predictable patterns, the typical, the norm, the regular. It was not about creativity, innovation. It was not all about explosive possibilities, magnificent productivity, outlandish expressions of personal ability. It wasn't about that. It was all predictable. So for you to do that, you had to go through a system that was prefabricated to produce the same kind of people, the same kind of thinking, the same kind of possibility. Right. But we're in a different age right now where you are not paid, watch this, for your degree, but you are paid, watch, for the degree to which you are able to place value on what you have, and the degree to which you are able to promote it profitably, which means it's not even just about value. It's also about how well do you place premium on the value you have, and how well are you able to promote that, leveraging the modern tools and platforms. So that's the second thing. Not just what is available, but what is accessible. So I might not have it, but somebody else might have it. Okay? Let me give you an example. I'm hosting an event next week. I've been hosting this since 2011. We're going like fully virtual next week, right? For this current stream. And I mean, promotions, you're putting stuff out, putting word out, trying to get people in and all of that. Fantastic. And at some point, it occurred to me, I said, I have some promotional things to design and all of that. Why not let me offer the graphic designer a free seat, a free ticket, and we have about five categories of tickets. So let me give this person the free ticket, so I don't have to pay for the rest of the designs, because I paid for some of the designs, but I wanted to do some other stuff. So I said, I don't want to spend money. I'm hitting the cap on my marketing budget. So I didn't say to myself, I'm hitting the cap on my marketing budget, so I will not design some other graphics. No, I said I need to design those graphics. So what is accessible? Barter. Let me give them a free ticket to access some parts of the training, and then let me get the designs without paying. Now, this is what I'm talking about. It's just a simple example. But do you know that there are certain skills? Do you know that there are certain things that you have at your disposal right now? Certain relationships, certain assets, certain ideas, certain skills that you can exchange for value. Like, you don't have to have the money for it. It just has to be accessible. That's very important as well. Excuse me. Number 3 is that you now have to think about associations. When you think about abundance, don't just think about assets. Don't just think about access. So the first one is possibilities based on assets, possibilities based on access. Number 3 is possibilities based on associations, relationships. Relationships. Why is this important? Do you know that if you rub minds with people on a certain level, you either become as sharp as they are, or you become as dull as they are? And this is so true, that if your conversations revolve around scarcity, revolve around not having enough, revolve around, oh my God, how will I pay the bills? The bills are as high as hills, and oh, my debts are as high as a mountain. And that's all you're speaking about. the inner story of your life will remain that of lack, that of want, that of scarcity, that of impossibility. But if you begin to say to yourself, if you begin to allow your mind shift based on what? Conversation. So write this down if you're taking notes. Conversations lead to conversion. Conversations lead to conversion. What does that mean? What that means is that whenever I am beginning to have conversations, I'm being converted. Now, nobody comes and says, oh, you know what? Nobody says to you, so I want to convert you into a poor person. Nobody says that. Nobody even says, I want to convert you into a thief. I want to convert you into a corrupt person. Nobody says that. What they do, what they do is that they begin to introduce their philosophies, their thinking patterns, their ideologies, their orientation, their belief systems. They begin to transfuse that into you through diffusion and through verbal osmosis. There's an exchange of energy that begins to either weigh you down or lift you up based on where they are. So for me, that training was a major turning point. I'll give you another turning point. I was in the UK, and sometime in 2000, I believe, 13, I went for an event, and at this event, quite a number of speakers spoke. So many speakers spoke, right? And high energy, high value, and all. And at the end of it, the speakers would pitch their coaching programs or their masterminds and all of that. And I discovered that most of these people were pitching products of like between $2,000 and about $15,000, right? Between $2,000 and about $15,000. Guess what? People were rushing to go make their payment. And in my mind, I was like, what is going on? How can people be falling over themselves to pay for a 6-week coaching program, a 2-month coaching program, a 6-month coaching program for $3,000, for $5,000, for $10,000? That broke something in my mind. It just redefined everything. And it was after that I was able to charge individuals what I used to charge corporates before. So these are 3 major shifts that you must make in your mind. 3 things. Number 1, possibilities based on assets. Part of assets, what do I have? Part of assets, my brand value. Part of assets, goodwill. Part of assets, favor. Part of assets, intellectual power and ability. Right. So for example, you remember, I believe his name is Ronald Wayne. I believe that's the name. And that's the guy who was with them when they started Apple at the beginning, but somehow he sold his shares, right? When he sold his shares, he didn't realize he was selling his future. The story goes that if his shares were converted to today's currency, I believe it would be worth over $100 million. Over $100 million. So think about that. Can you just imagine? He did not realize the possibilities based on assets. He did not realize that. Think about that. Number 2, possibilities based on access. This is how come it's possible for you to start a business without you having any money at all. Why? Because all you need is somebody has a need, somebody else can solve the need, and you are the person who comes in between. So let me also tell you this about access. In access, either you be the bridge or you build the bridge. So for abundance mindset, always think to yourself, am I being the bridge or am I building the bridge? You must be able to be one of the two. Either you be the bridge or you build the bridge. Between who needs the service, who renders the service. And for connecting them, you get paid. This is where agents work. This is how brokers make money. This is the whole idea behind finder's fee. This is the whole idea about introductions, right? Can you be the bridge or can you build the bridge? And then number 3, of course, is the all-important concept of association. You will not be richer than your relationships. Your relationships, guess what? Determines your revenue. Your relationships determine your revenue. I'll tell you something. You can do the same thing that you've been doing for years. You do it now for a different set of persons, and guess what happens? All of a sudden, you are paid a different amount of money. All of a sudden, things turn around. So for example, let me give an example. For years, I've done like slides for a couple of people, just do slides for them and all of that. And some, when I have time, just do it for free and all of that. And then there came a time where somebody needed a certain presentation done. Bridget Election says, and access it, you be the Bridget. I do both. I'm Bridget. Hey, come on. I love it. I love it. Bridget. All right. So here's the deal. And then all of a sudden, I got introduced to somebody who needed my presentation, my slide design service, my presentation design services. And then now I'm in a place where I bill hundreds of thousands to design slides based on the sophistication of the slides, right? 100,000, boom, above. So these are possibilities based on association. So in one place, I was doing it for free. Another place, I was doing it for a fee. What happened? My mind changed. Now, let me just mention this. All of these things will require your own commitment. Why? Because there's already a pattern in your mind. There's associative conditioning in your mind. Your mind is already predisposed to a certain way of thinking. It's already predisposed to, I don't have enough. I can't do it. I will afford it later. All of those things are stories that we've told ourselves. There is nothing like later. Later is an illusion that we create as our reality. Okay, so later is an illusion. Say, I'll do it later. It's an illusion. If you're not taking a step in the now to birth what you're hoping to do later, to at least produce the seed of it with some kind of commitment, then that later will just remain a figment of your imagination. There's no date in the calendar called later.